All right. Good morning, everybody. We are live here. I am broadcasting live from the birdhouse, but today we also have a special guest. You might be familiar with her and her books. I would like to welcome to our broadcast Randi Minetor, who is a local author to the Rochester area, if you happen to be from Rochester, but we've been getting people tuning in from all over the place. So you might get a different audience of people today that might not be super familiar with you. So I want to hand it over to you. I'm really interested in your topic today. It's talking about your newest book. I know you've written a lot of books, though. What are you up to now? Do you know?
I'm about to sign the contract on my 97th book, so which is exciting, and it will be a book that will be of interest to people here in Rochester. It's about birding in upstate New York and where to go to find the birds that you want to see. So I'm really looking forward to doing that one.
Perfect. That is right up our alley. So yeah, if you have any questions for Randi during the broadcast, absolutely, you can put those in the comments. We'll get to those at the end of her presentation. And if you are local to the Rochester area, Randi will be here at the Birdhouse on Saturday doing a book signing for this book and a whole bunch of her other books that she has out. So let's see, I can add your presentation here and I will let you take it off from here.
All right. Thank you so much, Liz. I'm so pleased to be talking to the Birdhouse audience today because you are my people. And every time I set foot in the Birdhouse, I meet, 10 more people that have the same passion I do. So I'm really pleased to be able to introduce you to this book that came out in September, The Complete Language of Birds, and tell you about how birds created the world. See, going the wrong way. There we go. So in the beginning, there was a goose. This goose, in fact, an Egyptian goose, and at the time, the only being in the universe. Egyptians call it Genjin Ware, or the Great Honker. And this goose carried and protected the egg that, when hatched, would produce all of life on Earth. But another being actually laid this egg. Jeb, the god of earth, also known by the nickname the Great Cackler. Whether or not Jeb was actually a goose himself is kind of subject to interpretation, but when he evolved into human form over the centuries, he often wore an Egyptian goose or another bird as part of his headdress. In this particular case, looks like a gull is sitting up there. Now, Egypt's creation story also includes a third being, Amun, Lord of the Thrones, who also liked to take the form of a goose, as you can see here in this petroglyph. In fact, the legend says that Amun's goose cry of victory over his adversaries became the very first sound ever heard by the people of Earth. And to commemorate this, Amun is known as the Great Shrieker. So Jeb laid a golden egg that contained the sun. Genjin Ware incubated and hatched the egg that brought all the other beings into existence. And Amun's goose presence scared off all the early adversaries. The result was, well, let there be light. Who knew that one goose could be so powerful? So meanwhile, down at the southern tip of Africa, the indigenous Khoisan people tell the story of their creator, a god called Swegob, who ignited a great fire to bring all of the traits of the animals out of the ether and into reality. He gathered all of these traits and baked them into all kinds of animal shapes, kind of what we're doing with Christmas cookies right now. And as he did this, a Cory bustard, this very large bird with broad wings, served as his helper. The Cory bustard fanned the flames continually with its wings, keeping the fire burning until all of the animals were fully baked. And in a wonderful Aboriginal legend from Australia, all life began in the dark, skulking its way around the earth as best it could. The spirits of the sky spent part of an eternity deciding how they would bring light into the world. So they built a huge pile of sticks and they planned to ignite, but they didn't want to frighten all the beings on the ground by suddenly producing this big burst of light that no one had ever seen before. So one day, an emu named Dinawan and a brolga named Bralach sat side by side on their nests, protecting their eggs in the dark. And as they talked about the children they would bring into the world soon, they began to argue about whose children would be stronger and whose would be more clever. So the discussion became more and more heated, and finally, Bralach grabbed one of Dinawan's eggs in her bill and used all of her fury to throw it as high as she could into the sky. So high did this egg go that it collided with the huge pile of sticks collected by the spirits. The egg broke open, the yolk spilled over the sticks, and somehow this kindled them into a great bonfire. The sky lit up, bathed the earth in light, and showed everyone just how beautiful the earth was. From that day forward, the spirits decided that they would build a great fire every morning to light up the earth and let it burn until evening. But they still worried that the transition to light every day would frighten the animals. So they searched for one animal who could call to everyone each morning before they lit the fire to let them know that light was on its way soon. And which animal did they choose? Well, if you've been to Australia, you know it was the laughing kookaburra, who was only too happy to volunteer to play this important role. So to this day, this devoted bird wakes up an entire continent by calling just before sunrise. Can you hear that? Okay. After the birds get the world up and running, they continue to play pivotal roles in the days of the earth, the early days. One of the big surprises for me as I researched this book, The Complete Language of Birds, was the sheer number of cultures around the world that record a great flood in their origin stories. We all know about Noah and the ark, of course, and that as the waters began to recede once the 40-day flood stopped, Noah released first a raven and then a dove to see who would find land. The raven never returned, suggesting perhaps that it found some nice waterlogged carrion to munch on and forgot all about the ark. But the dove felt more of a duty to Noah for saving its life, so it brought back an olive leaf. This meant that the land had begun to emerge from the water. Well, other cultures tell the story a little differently. In some areas of the United States, Christians associate the painted bunting with the rainbow that God sent to Noah as a sign of his covenant with the earth. Painted buntings are the living embodiment of the rainbows, reminding us that God protects us and will not destroy his creation again. In the Biracek area of Turkey, however, people believe that Noah released, of all things, a northern bald ibis, a bird that they see as a symbol of fertility to guide the repopulation of the earth. Now, the Athabascans of Alaska believe that the Great Flood came to an end with the help of the bittern. Bitterns swallowed enormous amounts of water, flew to where the water would do the most good, and regurgitated the water to form new rivers, like this braided river up there in Alaska. And an Ojibwa legend from here in North America tells us that long ago, the Creator sent a great flood to purify the world and drown everything evil. And one man, Wayne Abujo, worked quickly and built himself a raft and managed to keep himself and just a few animals afloat for an entire month as they waited for the water to recede. But the water didn't go down. So he summoned several different birds to dive to the bottom and retrieve a little bit of dirt from the old world, which he would use to start a new continent. The loon was the logical savior, of course, but he tried and he failed. So then the dove volunteered, and as you can imagine, that didn't go very well. The poor thing nearly drowned. But finally, a lone coot took on the challenge without telling anyone what he intended. Time passed before the other birds noticed he was gone and started to search for him. And they found him floating behind the raft, unconscious, but still breathing. Sure enough, when they started to resuscitate him, they found a little bit of mud from the bottom of the floodwater stuck to his bill. The coot had saved them, and Wainabujo could restart the continent. It's worth noting that many other Native American legends of the Great Flood tell the same story, but with a different waterfowl as the hero. In the Algonquin culture, for example, it's a merganser who brings up the morsel of earth using its strong feet to push off from the raft and drive itself all the way down. Meanwhile, according to a Maori legend in New Zealand, the god Tawaki, who makes lightning and thunder, caused the flood when he created the crystal floor of heaven. The crystal floor caused all of the water in the sky to fall right on Fjordland, where the Fjordland penguin lives. This area receives some of the most torrential rain in New Zealand, so the Fjordland penguins have been credited with actually making this rain fall and perhaps even assisting Tawaki in creating the Great Flood. And in the jungles of Panama, the Great Flood serves as an origin story for the Great Tinamu. It seems that after the flood covered the world in water, the sun returned and a rainbow appeared, and the great Tinamu, this dun-colored bird that blends right in with the surrounding foliage, saw the rainbow, and its intense colors scared it. It flew away from all of the other animals and retreated into the murkiest part of the forest, where it lives to this day, shunning color in favor of darkness. These are just a few of the flood-related stories I found in which birds play the starring role, but these amazing birds have many more lessons to teach us throughout the world's folklore and mythology. Before I started work on the complete language of birds, I hadn't thought much about what birds must have represented to ancient civilizations, because we take so much knowledge for granted now. We know so much science. But there was once a time when people knew very little science about birds' habits and behavior, in particular a time when they still called science philosophy. So when these people looked at the world around them and all the things they couldn't explain, they filled in some of the gaps with birds and their amazing abilities. Here's one of my favorite examples of this. Before science understood what we do now about migration, a very recent discovery in geologic time, it seems to many observers that birds just vanished in the fall and reappeared in the spring from wherever they had hid all winter. One of the most bizarre theories about this involves the barnacle goose, a European species not unlike our own Canada goose. Theorists back in the 500s AD saw barnacles along the wharves and the docks and on the bottom of boats, so they guessed that the geese transformed into these tiny barnacles for the winter, adhered to the surface of the boats to wait out the frigid weather, and in spring, when it got warmer, they got the cue they needed to change back. Back in 350 BC, the learned Greek philosopher Aristotle, of all people, theorized that swallows, with their ability to dive so close to the surface of lakes and ponds, actually dove to the bottom in fall and burrowed in the mud to wait out the winter. The whole oxygen thing hadn't really come to light yet, so that's why this theory seems a little odd to us. This theory actually held on until the late 1700s, if you could imagine that, when sailors returning to Europe from warmer climates at the end of winter reported seeing huge flocks of swallows in Africa and somehow managed to put two and two together. Then, in 1822, German villagers shot down a white stork that had a wooden spear piercing its neck. The spear's unusual wood could only have come from Africa. So in a flash of insight, the German hunters realized that this bird must have migrated all the way down to another continent and then come back. So a single white stork finally changed the way ornithologists understood migration. That being said, so much of what people around the world attribute to birds has really nothing at all to do with science. Wondrous parrots, like the imperial Amazon, the national bird of the Commonwealth of Dominica, are believed to have the ability to communicate with the spiritual realm. Not only can they fly high enough to reach the gods in the clouds, but they can actually form words. So you may need to watch out what you say around a parrot, or he may tattle to the ruling spirits, or worse, to your deceased relatives. Wouldn't that be fun? One of our favorite North American birds, the anhinga, has represented different things to different cultures. We know that the bird's classic stance, holding its wings out from side to side to dry after diving for a fish dinner, looks like this. And some Christians see this as a symbol of the crucifix, making the anhinga a perpetual reminder of the passion of the Christ, and therefore selfless, forgiving, and holy. But on the other hand, the indigenous Tupi people of Brazil gave the anhinga its name. The name means devil bird in their language. They determined that the anhinga is a trickster and a troublemaker. They reached this conclusion because the bird swims with its body submerged and only its head out of the water, resembling a snake. Such a creature has got to be up to no good, right? Well, here's one of my favorites. Two categories of birds, magpies and mynas, that require us to be especially respectful when we see them, asking after their health and their family's welfare. If we treat them with disdain or ignore them altogether, we may meet a particular fate based on how many birds we see together. There's even a nursery rhyme that makes this clear. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy, 5 for silver, 6 for gold, 7 for a secret never to be told. So whenever you see a myna or a magpie much more likely in North America, be sure to greet it warmly. Good afternoon, sir or miss. How are you today? Is your family well? If you're with a group and you don't want to look like a lunatic, just smile and nod or bow your head slightly. I'm told that the bird will understand. Now, one of my favorite stories out of Greek mythology involves the common kingfisher, this gorgeous bright blue bird of the rivers and lakes of Europe, Southeast Asia, and parts of the Asian continent. This is the tragic tale of Ceyx and Alcyone, two lovers in the days when Greek culture involved many gods living on Mount Olympus. Ceyx and Alcyone were soulmates, but equally important at the time, they were particularly well matched in physical beauty. This made the couple very popular with the gods, who observed their romance with great interest, kind of the way we watch The Bachelor now. The pair married and they began a life together, and they were so happy that they gave each other little nicknames, like most married couples do. Unfortunately, they chose to call one another Zeus and Hera, the names of the two gods at the very top of the Greek pantheon. Instead of flattering Zeus, this made him very angry. Zeus was kind of a jerk. So one day, when Ceyx boarded a ship to Ionia, Zeus kicked up a storm, and his wrath created a massive wave that swallowed up the ship. Ceyx drowned, and his body sank to the bottom of the sea. Hera, however, knew how devastated Alcyone would be if she never knew for certain what had happened to Ceyx. So as she watched the young woman wait and weep by the shore, Hera caused Ceyx's body to wash up near where Alcyone waited for word of him. Alcyone, anguished by her loss, threw herself into the sea and drowned. Now Zeus felt remorse for what he had done. So he resurrected both of them from the dead and turned the two lovers into halcyon birds, naming them for Alcyone. Today we know them as common kingfishers, and every summer for 2 weeks, the winds grow calm, so kingfishers can nest on the beach and bring a brood into the world. We call these the halcyon days, a period of calm and happiness. And Alcyone remains part of that taxonomic name for several of the world's kingfishers. Now, have you ever wondered how goldfinches got their bright yellow color? The Iroquois people did, and the story has been passed down for generations. It seems a fox chased a raccoon to make the little bandit its dinner. The raccoon ran up a tree, as raccoons can do, but foxes cannot. So the hungry fox waited all day at the bottom, but the raccoon didn't come down. Eventually, the fox dozed off, and when he awoke, he found that the raccoon was gone, but before it left, it painted the fox's eyes shut with tree resin. The resin had hardened and it wouldn't come off. So the fox, now completely blind, called and called for help. And some drab little finches took pity on the crying fox, and they flew in and they pecked off the resin. The fox thanked them for this good deed by using some bright yellow flowers nearby to color their plumage bright yellow, the color of sunshine. And the goldfinches wear this plumage all spring and summer to this day. This Canada goldenrod, a native plant to upstate New York, might have been just what this fox used to paint the goldfinches. Now, the story of the trap fox and the helpful bird is one of the tales that shows up in the folklore of many different cultures, where it may be used to explain hummingbirds' iridescence or the bright color of a northern cardinal. So we can imagine people of many different tribes coming together thousands of years ago in meeting places like Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, Wapatki in Arizona, or in this place pictured here, which is known now as Aztec Ruins National Monument. So they'd come together and they would trade goods and tell stories in kivas or in the shadows of ceremonial mounds. And one tribe might have an explanation for a specific thing that the others hadn't explored yet. So these stories spread and they became part of one another's cultures. Few birds have inspired as many folk tales about themselves as the northern lapwing, a well-known, easily recognized bird of Europe and part of Asia. Now, a Swedish story tells us of a young woman serving as a handmaiden to the Holy Mother Mary in Sweden. Apparently, John the Baptist and Jesus also made a trip through the Scottish Orkneys, but we won't get into that here. Anyway, the girls stole Mary's scissors, and Mary, a more wrathful version of the Holy Mother than we know, punished her by turning her into a northern lapwing. She chose a lapwing because its tail resembles a pair of scissors, and the lapwing has only one call. It says "tavit," which is Swedish for "I stole." The northern lapwing is also said to have been present at the crucifixion of Jesus. This story tells us that three birds came to Christ's aid on the cross. First, the stork came and called, "Strengthen him!" Then the swallow tried to actually remove the thorns from the crown to give him more comfort. But finally, the northern lapwing came and circled the cross, crying, "Let him suffer." Jesus blessed the stork and the swallow, but he condemned the lapwing for all time. Now we have many stories about lapwings as mischievous or even cruel birds. The lapwing's bad reputation even extends from Europe into Asia, where a Russian creation story says that when the Slavic god Perun made the world, he gave all the birds a job to carry water to fill all the many indentations for seas, lakes, and rivers, just as the bittern did in North America. Everyone pitched in except the lapwing, who refused. So God punished the bird by declaring that it would always have to get water from puddles. Today, if you want to see a lapwing, you'll need to look in mud flats with shallow water in Europe, just as you would look, honestly, for any other plover-like bird. Centuries later, perhaps still part of its punishment for all of these transgressions, lapwing eggs became a delicacy. The eggs were not cultivated on farms because lapwings don't do well in domestic life, so the eggs had to be found in the wild, making them a very pricey item in markets, none of which was good for the lapwings. In recent years, the practice has been banned by the European Union, but in the Netherlands, finding the first lapwing egg of the season is still a custom, but the laws have changed. Now, when you find that egg, you just take a picture. You can't take it out of the nest. So let's turn now to some of the bravest and most superstitious people on the planet, those who ply their trade at sea. Entire books have been written about the omens and the portents brought by pelagic birds over boats filled with sailors, fishermen, or explorers. Seafarers especially revere the albatross. Any of the 22 species of these magnificent birds, like this one that my husband got a picture of when we were in Hawaii last spring. For centuries, having an albatross around your neck has been synonymous with carrying a weighty burden that we can't wait to dispose of as soon as possible. This expression comes from Samuel Taylor Coleridge's poem, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which I will not recite for you now. But we do learn in that poem that killing an albatross is the worst luck of all bad luck, worse than breaking a mirror, inviting shipwreck and certain death. So how do we counteract this bad omen? The person who killed the bird has to wear it on a rope around his neck, literally carrying the burden of the misdeed. As an albatross can weigh as much as 18 pounds, this penance is nothing to take lightly. Albatross lore on the high seas can govern the lives of sailors with endless speculation of whether an albatross following a ship is a good omen with a promise of the bird's protection, or a bad omen of an oncoming storm with the bird hiding behind the ship to avoid the worst of it. Whichever it turns out to be, there's yet another twist in this. The albatross most likely carries the soul of a sailor lost at sea. So whether it's good news or bad news, the bird's protection or its warning are all meant with the best of intentions. Coleridge's poem dominates seabird lore, so it may seem that albatrosses are the only birds that can alter a sailor's fortune. But the family of northern storm petrels also carry considerable weight with seafarers. The storm part of the name comes from their habit of taking refuge from an oncoming gale by following closely behind a ship, letting the large structure and the sails block the worst of the weather. Sailors took this as a dependable warning that a storm was on its way. Some, however, thought that the birds actually brought the stormy weather with them, making a flock of storm petrels at a ship's stern a very worrisome sight. In fact, some seafarers went so far as to call it good luck if a storm petrel happened to defecate on them as it passed over them. This is a good time to remind you of the first rule of birding: never look up with your mouth open. So killing a storm petrel, even in retaliation for the defecation, was and is still considered bad luck. And if the shooter wishes to invite bad weather for a very long stay, so if you want to find yourself caught at sea in the middle of a hurricane, all you have to do is shoot down a storm petrel. But as long as we're on the subject of disgusting things people do at sea, fishermen of old observed gray herons, the European version of the great blue heron, standing patiently waiting for fish to swim by at just the right distance, and decided that something about the heron's feet must attract the fish. So they carried a heron's foot to improve their luck, and some coated their fishing lines with a noxious goo made from the heron's feet and fish and fat. As this practice has faded, we can assume that it was not effective and maybe just intolerably disgusting. I also learned some fairly dark things about birds' lives, and I made a point of including these in the book as well, because readers need to know that some of the world's birds face challenges from people with very selfish ends. The parrots of the Caribbean islands, for example, these beautiful birds, have been poached nearly to death for the black market on pet birds. Some of the islands have moved to name these birds as their national symbols, which releases funds and organized efforts to save them. But on some of these islands, it's virtually impossible to see these parrots that were once abundant there. You need special permission to go into wildlife refuges that have highly elevated levels of protection. And then we have the fate of the ortolan, a tiny bird that has had the bad luck of becoming a delicacy in parts of Europe. The recipe is gruesome. They fatten the bird up in a cage for more than 3 weeks. Then they actually kill it by drowning it in Armagnac brandy. The chef then cooks it and serves it whole, and the gourmands who eat the ortolan pop it down in one bite, but first they toss a napkin over their faces so they won't be seen stuffing their mouths with this little morsel. Only the beak remains on the plate when they're finished. I'm glad to report that the European Union, in its infinite wisdom, has banned this practice, but there are still corners of Europe where the name ortolan makes mouths water. Finally, let's talk about some birds that don't exist. As we have seen, long before we began to understand birds in scientific terms, miraculous flying creatures became part of nearly every culture's mythology. Sometimes the powers of actual living birds simply didn't rise to the levels the gods and storytellers required, so birds needed to do something more. Meld with the body of a god or a goddess, for example, or become the lead character in a myth so vivid that it needs a supernatural species to tell us. Creating birds that have supernatural powers makes them larger than life, allowing us to attach all kinds of deeds and stories to them. This makes these mythical birds the catalyst for just about any situation that requires an explanation beyond the ordinary. They may have the ability to heal the sick, determine if crops will thrive or wither, bestow happy marriages and fidelity on lucky couples, bring good luck and prosperity, or guide people to new lands where they can build their capital city. In Egypt, the god Thoth takes on the mantle of a bird, specifically an African sacred ibis, while he controls the passage of time and the change of seasons. Thoth is god of the moon, wisdom, writing, hieroglyphics, science, magic, and art. So he's a busy dude. The ibis head allows him to change the pace of the passage of time. Special note, this only works for Thoth. Don't try this at home. On the flip side of this benevolence, a mythical bird called an oozlum provides an excuse for foolishness, shifting the blame for mistakes away from humans and onto a bird just too silly to behave itself. In British and Australian legend, the oozlum flies in a spiral of tighter and tighter circles until it eventually flies up its own butt. I'm guessing that everyone here knows an oozlum in some form. And here's the feng huang, or Chinese phoenix, one of China's 12 ornaments, ancient symbols that denote the power and authority of the wearer. The ornaments date back at least to 2294 BC, and perhaps much earlier than that, embroidered on the clothing of high-ranking people in Chinese society. The description of this beast has changed over the millennia, so this one follows one of the more recent depictions, more or less. A golden pheasant's head, a mandarin duck's body, a peacock's tail, a crane's legs, and a parrot's bill. Now, wherever the feng huang appears, it implies the virtue and the honesty of the people it adorns, and it often appears at weddings as a blessing of fidelity and harmony, and some households bring it out to display in good times and hide it away when times turn tough. Now, exactly how and where we acquired the legend of the phoenix has been a subject of debate for thousands of years. It appears long before Greek mythology cemented this story of an immortal bird who eventually tired of its cushy life in paradise. Phoenix traveled to the mortal world where things lived and died, but the bird knew that he would remain immortal. But one night, the phoenix built a nest of twigs, and as he waited for Apollo, the sun god, to arrive, he began to sing. Morning came, and Apollo passed over in his golden chariot, but the sun god so admired Phoenix's song that he actually stopped in midair to listen. And as he enjoyed the song, a spark from the sun dropped down onto the phoenix's nest of twigs. The nest ignited, Phoenix burst into flames and dissolved into ashes. But all was not lost for Phoenix. 3 days later, this bird sprang up from the ashes, young and renewed. The bird realized that he could do this again and again, but understood that he would have to wait 1,000 years before his next renewal. So he continues to repeat this cycle of death and rebirth as he will for eternity. So that's the complete language of birds, with stories about nearly 400 species of birds around the world. It's illustrated rather than photographic, as you've seen, with vintage drawings of a wide range of birds from a wide range of artists, mostly of the 19th and early 20th century. So these are vintage. This was an utterly delightful book to write, combining my love of birds, natural science, and history. And I hope it's as much fun for you as it was for me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'll be signing books at the Birdhouse on Saturday from 10 to 1, and I look forward to meeting you.
Yeah, thank you for the great presentation. So this is probably just a short intro into all the different books or all the different birds that are in the book. It's a nice big, you can kind of see here, it's a really nice hardcover, beautifully made book. And it's part of a series, right? There's other complete language of books.
Yes, they're not my books, but yeah, it started with the complete language of flowers. They've done herbs and dream interpretation and all kinds of things, but the birds were the first animal in this series, and I'm hoping to be able to do some more for them.
And we do carry some of your other books here at the store too, which are quite popular. So I think I should mention those. You have a backyard birding and butterfly guide about backyard birding, and then also butterfly gardening, right? Which is
right.
a topic a lot of people are interested in also.
Right, exactly. We focus in that book on the gardening side on native plants, the plants that birds actually recognize as food. For them, so that they make sure that they go to those plants, and the more native you can put in your garden, the more birds you're going to get. As my own yard is testament to that. I'm loaded with birds, and it's also true of butterflies. Many butterflies develop symbiotic relationships with specific plants, so they only feed on that one plant, like monarchs and milkweed. So the more of that more of those things you plant, the more butterflies you can expect to see.
Fabulous. So people are always asking for a good book about learning how to do some butterfly gardening. So this will give you that, and also how you can attract birds to your yard, which is perfect. So they usually tend to go hand in hand. You guys also have a hiking waterfalls book and a best easy day hikes book for Rochester, which are super popular. So even if you're looking for something for a gift for somebody who's not necessarily into birding, we do have those books too, which are quite popular, especially the waterfalls is a very, very popular book here at the store.
Yeah, that's great. I will tell you that every trail in our hiking books we have walked personally, so we have firsthand knowledge of what is an easy hike, what is not an easy hike, some of the things that you will encounter on some hikes, and which ones you can just see one waterfall, and which ones, like Watkins Glen, where you can see 19 waterfalls. So lots of variety there for people of really pretty much any skill level.
And then with you, it sounds like you're working on now a bird book about local birding, and we talk about places that you can go locally to see birds. Is there a place right now this time of the year that you have a favorite location or favorite place to go to see a good diversity of birds in the Western New York, upstate New York area?
Well, the main place to go once the weather gets cold like this and we get close to the winter solstice is Nations Road down in just south of Avon on Route 39. You take a right and go to take a right on Fowlerville Road and go down to Nations Road. And that's where the short-eared owls spend the winter hunting on a couple of specific fields there. So you'll see short-eared owls, you'll see red-tailed hawk, you'll see northern harrier, and some other things too, like northern shrike and the eastern bluebirds that spend the entire winter there roosting in the bluebird houses that they've staked out for themselves for spring. So there's lots of birds down there, even this time of year, and as well as horned larks and snow buntings feeding along the side of the road. So there's a lot to see, and it's really worth doing.
Definitely worth the trip. So looks like there's just a couple of comments from people who are on saying hi and good morning, and Rachel on here saying thank you for sharing. So it looks like that is everybody's comments for the day. And so we will be back with another live stream on Saturday at 10 a.m. And if you are local, you can absolutely come to the Birdhouse on Saturday to meet Randy, and I assume Nick might be there
Yep,
too.
my husband, who
Yes.
usually does the photography for all of our books, will be there as well. So it'll be fun to meet you.
Wonderful. Yes. So stop in between 10 and 1 on Saturday to meet Randy and Nick. And we will see you on another live broadcast on Saturday. And until then, everybody have a great week. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.